S.J. Watson, what did you think of the film version of your book Before I Go to Sleep?
Well, I loved it. I genuinely loved it. I thought it was a really good version of it. I mean, obviously there are some changes that Rowan and Liza made in order to make the film work as a film, whereas the book hopefully works as a book, obviously. And but I could see why all those changes were made, and they were all made for good reasons. They weren't made for vanity, for reasons of vanity, I think. So, and I thought it was a really good, solid, old-fashioned, if you like, sort of 90-minute thriller. So I really like it.
What style would have been inappropriate for this kind of story?
Well, I don't know about, I'm not particularly sophisticated viewer of movies. I mean, I like movies, I always loved movies, I've always loved films, but I've never done a film criticism course or anything like that. So, but I just think it's a really, I think it's just kind of Hitchcockian, really. I quite like that notion that it's a thriller, but it's not based on, time travel or, people swapping places or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with those films, but I like the fact it's just kind of centered on, some really strong performances in a quite an old-fashioned way, in a way. There's a male and female lead who play off each other, and there's that mystery element going through it. So I think it's a bit of a return, if you like, to those kinds of films from a few years ago. So I suppose that's how I would describe it. I suppose I would have been upset if somebody had tried to introduce lots of new elements or new characters. I think one of the things I was trying to achieve with the book, if you like, is to make something which is actually quite claustrophobic, which has quite a small world. And so I suppose I would have resisted anybody's attempts to open it up in some way, or to make it more fancy, if you like.
I was going to ask you if you thought of a film version while you were writing the novel, but I'm going to turn that on its head and ask if it is in fact possible for a novelist not to think of a film adaptation while they're writing a book. Can you please put your hand on your heart and tell me honestly what the case was with you?
Well, I think if you're asking me whether I wrote the book with a view to it becoming a movie, no, because when I wrote it was my first novel, and so when I was writing it, I didn't even really think there was much chance of it becoming a book, to be really honest, because you hear so many stories about how difficult it is in publishing, and it is difficult in publishing, and as a debut author, it's difficult to get your work seen and to get your work out there. So I wrote it trying to write as good a book as I could, in the hope that one day there may be people who would read it. So I never seriously considered that it might be a movie. But if you're asking whether I wrote it in a filmic way, I suppose the way I write is I imagine the scenes in front of me, and I kind of imagine them being played out by actors, I suppose, in a way, albeit not. I don't picture known actors. I just think of the characters as existing. But I suppose I am imagining them playing the scenes out. So I'm trying to write in a way that would work dramatically. And I think, having been through this process of seeing Before I Go to Sleep made into a movie, I think that's probably something, certainly for my second book, I've written in a more filmic way, if anything. Again, not necessarily with a view to it being made into a film, but rather with a view to making it work on a dramatic level in a way that perhaps I hadn't focused so much with the first book. So I suppose the answer to your question is yes, but not in a cynical, let's hope this becomes a movie kind of way.
Now, when your agent got your manuscript, they sent it both to publishers and to film producers too. Is that correct?
Yes, it sort of is. It's half correct. I mean, it's true. We sent it out to publishers, and then I think, from memory, about 6 weeks later, it went, or maybe less, maybe a month later, it went out to film producers and film companies. But what actually happened was that Liza Marshall, who's the wonderful producer of the movie, somehow, through slightly nefarious means, I think, got hold of the script in that intervening period. So she had a head start on everybody else. Got hold of the book before we'd officially sent it out to film for film consideration. So it went out more or less simultaneously, but Liza got hold of it through a publishing contact, and to this day she won't tell me who that is. So
just to nail this point, that the impulse to get a book turned into a film is from both ends. It's both from interested producers, but it's also from literary agents and from publishers who would love to see it turned into a film.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think the film world is looking for material to adapt, and I think not all books are sent out, obviously, for consideration for film. I think it's my book. My agent and I have a literary agent, and also she has a colleague who agented the book for movies. They both felt it was a book that could make a movie and could make a good movie, so that's why they were quite keen to get it out there. I think they kind of felt they wanted to be on the front foot. I think they felt the book was going to be a success because it hadn't even been published then. So I think they had a feeling that people would come after the book. So it was probably a good idea to get out there first and get the book out there in the world.
Is it also with the view and with the knowledge that if you get a film made of a book, even if it's not a very good adaptation, it still nonetheless will boost sales of a book in a way that no other advertising campaign could do?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, there's no escaping the fact that a film adaptation of a book can ship a whole load more copies of the book. And what surprised me is it doesn't seem to make any difference how many copies the book has already sold. I mean, and I remember talking over here to my publisher about a very, very, very best, best-selling book that they'd sold. It sold millions of copies. And this is before the film came out. And when the film came out, I said to my publisher, I said, well, how many more copies did it sell when the film came out? Surely everybody had read it who was going to read it, And it sold another 5 times as many again. So, it really does shift extra copies of books. So I think that's from a purely financial point of view, that's one of the reasons that the publishing world, likes to get film adaptations made.
I understand from talking to other filmmakers and other authors that however successful a book is, however big a bestseller it is, in order for the film to become successful, the majority of people who need to go see it would be people who are not familiar with the book. Is that your understanding?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't have those kinds of statistics to hand. I think, from just from people who follow me on Twitter and have sent me comments and things, and Facebook comments and so on, I get the impression that there are a lot of people who are watching the movie who have seen the book, but then, yes, an awful lot of people who maybe had heard of the book but have never read it, and a lot of people who perhaps have never even heard of the book are going to see the movie. So I think it's a real mix. But, I think the movie does bring a whole audience who either hadn't read the book or some people I think are going to see the movie who've read the book and then watch the movie and then want to read the book again. So it's a real mix of people.
When you signed the rights over, did you retain any control at all? Did you insist on being part of the process, or did you say, "Here it is, you go"?
It was a bit of a mix, really. I mean, it was predominantly the latter. I mean, certainly in terms of the contract, I think when you sign the film rights over, contractually, I don't really have a lot of say in anything. But Rowan and Liza were very keen all the way through the process to keep me involved and to make me feel involved, and so they would send me drafts of the script and so on, and they would talk to me about casting and talk to me about even things like costumes and things. But I made the decision very early on that unless there was anything being suggested that I really disapproved of or really thought didn't work or wasn't in the spirit of the novel I wrote, unless that was the case, I would stay out of it, really, and just enjoy the whole experience, because I've heard so many stories of novelists who'd had an awful experience of seeing their book brought to the screen and who ended up in conflict with the filmmakers and hated the end product and just. So I thought, actually, the best thing I can do is, I took some care at the beginning to make sure that the book was in the hands of the right people. But I just thought, once I've done that, I can't really influence the outcome to any large extent, so the best thing to do is just to take a step back and enjoy the whole process and stay out of it, which is pretty much what I did.
So once you felt comfortable with the producer and the director, you were quite happy to contractually sign over full control to them, but with the gentleman's agreement, if you like, that they would consult you more on a handshake basis rather than anything formal.
I met Rowan and Liza at the very beginning of the process, before we'd even signed, and I think before we'd even started to talk about contracts and money and all those things, just to meet with them and see what kind of movie they wanted to make. And I could just tell. I mean, I joked the other day at an event, I said, actually more interested in a way were people, working with people who I felt like I could go for a drink with or a meal with, and actually have that kind of friendship with, in a way, because I felt like part of the team. Whereas I think, if I'd have been more cynical, if you like, or more sort of calculating about it, I don't think we'd have had as good an outcome. So for me, it was just about trusting the people that I was letting loose on the project.
What's like one or two major changes that have been brought to the story that you think are improvements?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest, it's not necessarily an improvement over the book, but one of the major changes is that in the book, Christine, the main character, uses a journal. She writes a journal in order to record her thoughts and memories and so on. And in the film, she uses a video diary. So that's quite a major change, but I think it's made for a very good reason. Obviously it makes perfect sense to me that in a written medium, so in a novel, she uses a written journal, and in a film, something you go and sit and watch, she uses a video diary. And I think that's it really lifts the film, I think, into a different onto a different plane, because you have the experience of watching Nicole Kidman reacting to herself, if you like, which is kind of really interesting to watch, and something that I think Nicole really enjoyed doing. So that's the biggest change. And the other change is, I suppose, if I could answer the question in a slightly more just general sense, it's just trimmed down the book. If Rona tried to do a scene-by-scene adaptation of everything that's in the book, I think, first of all, it would have been 4.5 hours long, probably, and secondly, it would have been probably quite boring, because there are things that you can do in the book. There are even whole scenes that you can write in the book which are just there for texture, really, and just there for background. And in a movie, they would have just slowed everything down and just really changed the pace. So I suppose the trimming down that Rowan's done into the essential beats of the story are what's really made it into the slick 90-minute thriller that we have.
Just for the record, how lucrative are selling the film rights to a book, and how do they compare with big sales? Do the companies come to you with large bags of cash? How does it work?
When the rights are sold, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but I think everybody has this idea that if you sell film rights to a book, that you can then, spend the rest of your life jumping in and out of swimming pools and sipping champagne and surrounding yourself with, supermodels, I was going to say, or whatever your particular thing is, But I mean, that's not the case. I mean, it's a nice amount of money, it's a significant amount of money, but it's not a life-changing amount of money. When the film is actually made, there's some more money. It's lucrative. It's not. It's not the millions that people think it is. I think a lot of people expect it once you. But actually, what it can do is lift the book sales, and so that's really where I think for lots of people that's where they see the real difference.
You do get something off the back end with the other film's performance, do you?
I think, obviously some films are made and they kind of sync with that trace, and there's no advertising campaign, and I imagine that doesn't make that much difference to book sales. But, if the film has a reasonable presence in the marketplace, as they would say, then that can only bring new readers to the work.